phrase, one verse of the rendition of John's Gospel that Nancy just read, that when I read this scripture earlier in the week, it just stood out to me. A fresh start with God. You see, John the Baptist had been out preaching in the desert and baptizing in the Jordan River in large part as a way of offering folks a fresh start with God. Getting a good baptismal bath, scrubbing the old sins from life's people were going out there to hear John, and they were experiencing a fresh start with God. That's what John was doing. And that's what Jesus came, as we talked about last week, to the Jordan River to affirm and endorse and embrace. Have you ever wanted that for yourself? Or your family? Or your church? Or your workplace? Or your country? Or the world? A fresh start with God. Those of us who consider ourselves veterans of this faith we call Christianity, we've been doing this church thing now, maybe some of us, for most of our lives. Sunday school songs, Bible verses, the Lord's Prayer, Holy Communion, and all the other practices of our faith that are second nature to our lives are just ingrained to us. And maybe some of us have a concern that somehow our way of doing church has grown out of touch with people. Or perhaps we remember a different day, a different community, a different neighborhood when we could open the doors of our churches and people just came in. And the people who came, well, they were folks, they were like us. They were the same folks we worked side by side with throughout the week. And their kids and our kids played together. And we saw them at the grocery store and the Friday night football games. And it was comfortable. And we sat beside them or across from them or in front of them on Sunday mornings. You see, church was a part of their routine as it was a part of our routine. It was church and it was community together. And it worked. Over time, though, change enters the world. Our world. And the connections through which churches in the past may have grown changed. The uniting common denominator of the neighborhood plant next door, or the neighborhood school, or even extended family bonds that were there, because you see the younger generation just came up and they stayed in the same place where the older generation lived, and the church just carried on. That all now is much different. So the methods through which we found a way to bind our lives together and to share our faith with one another started to not be as effective or easy to come by. And as strange as it may sound, it is us, even we church people, who maybe have started to look and long for a fresh start with God. We're in the same situation as the people to whom John the Baptist preached and Jesus came. You see, they've been practicing their relationship with God using the tried and true methods that had been passed down to them through the generations. Father Abraham on. But those methods and those structures had become less effective. And along the way, the methods started to get in the way of the message instead of conveying the message. And the prophets of the Old Testament addressed the situation over and again. I believe it was the prophet Micah who lifted up that issue. Remember Micah when he said, "How can I stand before God and show proper respect to the high God? What should I do? Should I bring an armload of offerings topped off with yearling calves?" Well, if you want to bring an armload of offering, come on, okay? Would God be impressed if I brought him 1,000 rams with buckets and barrels of olive oil? Would he be moved if I sacrificed my firstborn child, my precious baby, as a way to cancel my sin? You see, those very ways were all tried and true ways for centuries that the people had been practicing their relationship to God through. But somewhere along the way, those very practices had become less and less effective, and in fact, they had become a stumbling block to God's people being what God wanted God's people. So Micah says, but God has made it plain. He's more interested in how I live, what I do. What God is looking for in men and women is quite simple. Micah says, it is that we do what is fair and just to our neighbor. That we be compassionate and loyal in our love. And that we don't take ourselves too seriously. But we take God very seriously. So the prophets keep talking about a coming Messiah who would offer the people a fresh start with God. Did it mean that the way they had been doing faith was inherently wrong? No, that's not the message. It just meant that, as often happens, the means had become more important than the ends. The methods were considered more sacred than the message. Protecting tradition and power structures had taken precedence over loving one another and caring for the children of the world. And so Micah and other prophets said, what does the Lord truly care about? He doesn't care about all that other stuff you're getting all undone about. God cares about doing justice and practicing mercy and walking humbly with our God. You see, in our lives as individuals and as a family, maybe sometimes we just need a fresh start. Maybe we've been carrying around on our backs a bag full of old stuff. Old hurt feelings. Old unresolved conflicts. Old guilt-ridden memories or bitter grudges. And that bag over time has gotten heavier and heavier and heavier, and it's weighing us down, and it's holding us back, and maybe it's even making us sick. And we want to let go of it, but we're afraid to let go of it. For we have the misconception that what is in that bag we're holding on to is our protection, our justification, our right to have. But that bag and the weight of that bag may be killing us. Amen. Anybody feeling yourself in that situation? You're tired and you're sick, and as they say, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And you sure wish there was another way to handle things. And then one day you hear a voice somewhere in the depths of your soul. That voice may come as a whisper above all the clamor. And that voice says something like this. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. You see, it's a voice offering us a fresh start. It's like, and I think I may have used this example before, but I love it. It's like the teacher who has a classroom full of second graders. And one little boy is having a hard time understanding how this math is done. And time again, he keeps getting the wrong answer. And so he takes that second grade eraser that is the size of a pack of cigarettes. I remember I had one like that, big old eraser. And he rubs the old answer away time and time again, leaving stains on the paper until, in nearly tears and frustration, he tears the paper with that eraser. And along comes the teacher. She places a gentle hand upon his shoulder. She offers a word that she'll help him figure this out. And she encourages him to try again. And she places on his desk a clean white sheet of paper. A fresh start. That's what God does for us. Sometimes whole groups of people need a fresh start. For entrenched ways of doing things and being a people become burdened by the sins of selfishness and greed and fear. A few years back at our mayor's Martin Luther King breakfast, the speaker was a Mr. Walter Washington, who was a native of Anderson, a graduate of Old Westside High School, and he had gone on to earn degrees from South Carolina State University and the University of Illinois, where he spent most of his career on the administrative staff. I remember so distinctly in his talk that morning, he mostly told stories about the way Anderson used to be when he was growing up here. Now, some of it was very good. He said it was a place where he felt looked after, and a place where his mama, who lived on Reed Street in a 3-room house, and she had not even an 8th grade education. It was a place where she could raise 3 sons, all of whom earned their college degrees. But I remember he also reminded us of an Anderson that at one time, the drive-in restaurant where he worked and served folks, he could not eat at as a customer. He told about there being 4 movie theaters in the city, one of which he was not allowed to enter, and one that only people of his skin color entered, and 2 where he had to enter a separate door from the white folks and sit in the balcony. He talked about his mother, who was a domestic engineer for 3 families in Anderson, and that she and her family were never to enter or approach the front door of those homes. Now, somewhere along the way, that way of being was challenged by voices who decided that the Lord truly does require us to do justice and love mercy. Now, we can't do justice if the rules of our culture try to lift up some people by keeping other people down. So, voices spoke up a few decades ago, and old ways were challenged. And through loss and sacrifice and risk, a world where all God's children can work and worship and eat and socialize across unnecessary boundaries has come into being, and it continues to come. Now, I know we like to look at the past and see it through rose-colored glasses, as if the past was some kind of utopia. But there are just some things today that are better than they were in those old days. As painful as it was to get there, are we not grateful that we've had a fresh start? Yes. Jesus came to offer a fresh start. And he calls his followers to join him in this new beginning. Now, the people who responded to Jesus were not necessarily the rich and famous, but everyday people like you and me. He did not coerce them into following him. He did not threaten them. He did not tell them, oh, you better follow me or God's going to send you to hell. Jesus never once said that. He did not promise them worldly success if they followed him. If you follow me, it's going to be health and wealth all the way. No, he never said that. In fact, he told them it could get rough along the way. He didn't present them a list of rules or a religious manifesto to entice them to follow him. He simply invited them to come and see for themselves. And what did they discover when they responded to him? They found the source of love. Unconditional love. And they took on a mission for bringing the kingdom of God into the world. A kingdom that is founded on love and ever moving toward greater justice. Could our prayer this morning be, God, give us a fresh start? May God lead us in the way of Jesus, even if it means traveling new pathways sometimes, or singing some new songs, or embracing some new relationships, or engaging in some new practices. I've said it before, but I believe it. We are living in incredibly exciting times. For God is up to something. Do you get that sense? He is up to something. And I think South Main's right in the middle of it. So may our response to him be, wherever he leads, I'll go. Wherever he leads, I'll go. I'll follow my Christ, who loves me so. Wherever he leads, I go. Let's pray. When we get stuck in our old ways of doing and thinking, when we try to hide behind barriers we've constructed, and we find ourselves withering, God grant us a fresh start. Call us to see the world and see you and see ourselves in a whole new perspective. Remind us again that the old part of the story is not so much the way we've always done things. The old part of the story is your love. Your love for us and your desire for us to love one another. Nothing can ever change that. But call us anew to find ways that we express that love and ways of being in the world that love is given priority is our prayer. If we're walking around today, God, burdened down by that bag of old stuff we've been carrying far too long, grudges and bitterness and resentments and self-righteousness, God, help us to hand that bag over to you so you can dump it out and give us